Have you ever watched someone walk into a room and somehow disappear? Not because they're hiding, not because they're rude, but because they've learned somewhere along the way that being seen doesn't feel safe. Maybe it's the coworker who eats lunch at their desk every day, headphones on, eyes down, or the neighbor who waves politely but never lingers, or the person scrolling through their phone at a party, not because they're bored, but because they don't know how to join the current. They're not antisocial. They're not broken. They're just alone. And if you've ever felt that way yourself, if you've gone weeks, months, even years without a single person to call just to hear a voice, you're not failing at friendship. You're carrying something older than loneliness. Something quieter. This isn't about laziness. It's not about being too picky or not trying hard enough. Having no friends is often the invisible scar of a nervous system that once learned connection equals risk, vulnerability equals danger, being yourself equals being left. And so, they stopped reaching, not out of indifference, but out of self-preservation. If this sounds familiar, whether in yourself or someone you care about, you're not strange, you're human. And this channel is a space for those learning to see beneath the surface. To understand, not just what people do, but why they had to. You belong here, even if it's been a long time since someone made you feel like you did. Imagine a child, maybe 6 or 7, sitting at the kitchen table, drawing a picture with bright reds and blues, full of pride. They run to show it to a parent. But the parent is on the phone, stressed, distracted. Not now, they say, without looking. Or worse, they glance, sigh, and say, "That's nice," before turning away. The child doesn't yell. They don't cry, at least not where anyone can see. Instead, they fold the drawing carefully, tuck it into a drawer, and learn something quiet. My joy is a burden. My presence is an interruption. Or maybe it wasn't neglect, it was inconsistency. One day, love came freely, hugs, laughter, "I'm so proud of you." The next, silence, coldness. Why can't you just be quiet for once? No explanation, no repair, just whiplash between warmth and withdrawal. So the child learned to read the room like a survival manual. They stopped sharing their dreams, stopped asking for help, stopped saying, "I miss you," or "that hurt," or "can we talk?" Because somewhere deep down, their young mind made a calculation. If I don't need anything, maybe I won't get hurt. If I don't take up space, maybe I'll get to stay. This wasn't weakness, it was brilliance. Their nervous system did what nervous systems do. It adapted to keep them safe in a world that felt unpredictable, conditional, or emotionally thin. Psychologists might call this an insecure attachment, often avoidant, sometimes anxious avoidant. But you don't need a label to understand what it feels like. A quiet belief that your needs are too much, that closeness always comes with a price, that the safest place is just outside the circle. And it wasn't just about parents. Maybe school was a minefield, bullied for being weird, ignored for being too quiet, or used by others who only wanted something from them. Maybe they moved often, never staying long enough to form roots. Or maybe their family prized self-reliance above all else. Big kids don't cry, don't bother anyone, you should be able to handle it alone. These aren't stories of bad people. Caregivers were often doing their best, shaped by their own unhealed wounds, stretched thin by poverty, trauma, or cultural silence around emotion. This isn't about blame, it's about pattern. And the pattern whispered, over and over, "You are safer alone. No one will truly stay. Better to expect nothing than to risk hoping." So they stopped hoping. Not because they didn't want connection, but because hope had burned them before. And that child? They grew up. But the lessons stayed woven into their bones, their breath, their instinctive pull away from closeness. Because sometimes the deepest loneliness begins not with being left, but with learning, very early, how not to ask to be held. Now as an adult, they don't say, "I'm lonely." They say, "I like my alone time." And part of that is true. Solitude is peaceful when it's chosen. But when it's the only option your nervous system trusts, It starts to feel less like peace and more like exile. They don't turn down invitations out of disinterest. They turn them down because their body tenses at the thought of small talk, of reading the room, of wondering, do they actually want me here, or are they just being polite? So they say, I'm busy, or maybe next time, and feel a strange mix of relief and grief. They might have hundreds of online connections, likes, comments, DMs, but no one they'd call at 2 a.m. No one who knows they hate the sound of chewing, or that they cry during dog commercials, or that they've been quietly struggling for months. And when someone does try to get close, they freeze. Not because they don't care, but because closeness feels like standing on thin ice. One wrong word, one moment of neediness, one sign they're too much, and the ice cracks. So they pull back, not to hurt, but to protect. It looks like indifference, but inside it's often a storm of longing wrapped in fear. What if I open up, and they leave? What if I ask for help, and they laugh? What if I show up as I am, and I'm still not enough? The cost is invisible but real. Chronic loneliness doesn't just ache emotionally. It wears on the body, elevated stress hormones, weaker immune response, higher risk of anxiety, depression, even heart disease. Science calls it a public health crisis. But to them, it just feels like normal. And here's the quiet tragedy. They often believe it's their fault. I must be unlikable. No one would want to be friends with someone like me. Maybe I'm just not built for connection. But it's not that they're broken. It's that their survival strategy, brilliant once, is now out of date. Their nervous system still thinks the world is unsafe, even when it's not. To others, their distance can feel confusing, even hurtful. A friend texts, "Hey, want to grab coffee?" They don't reply for days. Not because they don't care, but because replying feels like a performance they haven't rehearsed. They overthink. What if I say the wrong thing? What if they're just being nice? What if I run out of things to say and the silence swallows us both? So they stay silent, and the friend assumes they're not interested, and the cycle deepens. But beneath the silence isn't coldness, it's caution. It's a heart that still wants to connect, but has learned again and again that connection comes with risk. And so they wait, not for the perfect friend, but for proof that they won't be punished for being human. It's easy to think loneliness is just a personal failing, but the truth is, our world is built in ways that quietly reward isolation and punish vulnerability. Think about work. We're praised for being self-sufficient, low maintenance, easy to manage. Raise your hand too much, you're needy. Ask for emotional support, unprofessional. So people learn to armor up, keep quiet, and never let on they're drowning. Friendship becomes a luxury you don't have time for, not a human need. Or consider social media. We scroll through highlight reels of group trips, inside jokes, birthday surprises, and feel like we're watching life through a window. But those connections are often curated, conditional, or fleeting. You can have 1,000 followers and still go to bed feeling like no one would notice if you disappeared. Because attention isn't the same as belonging. And likes don't hold you when you're crying. Even our language betrays us. We call someone independent like it's a virtue, even when that independence is really just self-erasure. We say they're fine on their own, as if needing people is a flaw. But humans aren't meant to be islands. We're wired for co-regulation, for calming down together, not just alone in the dark. And then there's the myth of effortless friendship. We're shown movies where best friends just click. No awkwardness, no missteps, no repair. So when real connection feels messy or slow, we assume it's broken. We don't learn how to say, "I felt hurt when you cancelled," or "I'm nervous, I haven't had a close friend in years." We don't practice the gentle art of showing up imperfectly and staying anyway. Worse, we confuse availability with intimacy. We think, if they really cared, they just know. But real friendship isn't mind reading. It's asking, it's risking. It's saying, "I'd like to know you," even when your voice shakes. And for those who grew up learning that their needs were burdens, that kind of directness feels impossible. so they wait for someone to just get it. While the world keeps moving faster, louder, more transactional, we live in a culture that calls constant connection weakness and emotional restraint strength. But true strength isn't never needing anyone. It's daring to say I do, and surviving the risk that they might say no. The irony, the very behaviors that keep someone friendless, withdrawing, overthinking, avoiding vulnerability, are often the same ones our society quietly encourages. Be polite, don't impose, handle your own problems. Keep it light, don't be dramatic, be easy to be around. But being easy often means being invisible. And real friendship doesn't bloom in invisibility. It grows in the messy, tender soil of mutual risk, where two people say, "This is me," and the other says, "Me too." Until we question the norms that equate silence with strength and solitude with self-control, we'll keep mistaking survival for choice and keep leaving good people alone, not because they want to be, but because the world never taught them how to reach and be reached. If this is your pattern, if you've gone years without a close friend, please hear this first. You don't need to fix yourself to deserve connection. You're already worthy, not when you're more outgoing, not when you're less awkward, not when you finally figure out the right thing to say. But right now, as you are, healing doesn't start with becoming someone new. It starts with stopping the war against who you've been. So instead of asking, "Why can't I keep friends?" try asking, "What did I have to do to survive, and is it still serving me?" Notice the moments you perform instead of being present. When you say "I'm fine," but you're not. When you cancel plans because the thought of showing up feels like climbing a mountain. When you scroll instead of texting back, not out of indifference but exhaustion from the mental labor of connection. Ask yourself gently, am I doing this to feel safe or to be loved? Because safety matters. But safety without connection is just a very quiet kind of loneliness. Start small, tiny even. Reply to a text with more than lol. Say, "Actually, I've been having a rough week," to someone who asks how you are. Join a low-stakes group, a book club, a walking group, a volunteer shift, where the focus isn't on you but on something shared. Connection grows easier when it's not the main event. And remember, friendship isn't about being interesting, it's about being interested. Ask one real question, listen without fixing. Let someone else be human and give yourself permission to be too. If this is about someone else, a sibling, a coworker, a neighbor who seems friendless, don't take their distance as rejection. They may be screaming inside while staying silent outside. You don't have to rescue them, but you can leave a quiet door open. Say, "I'd love to hear how you're really doing if you ever want to share." Then give them space to choose. No pressure, no expectation, just a soft invitation. And protect your own energy. You can honor their pain without becoming their repair kit. A calm "I'll think about it," or "I need some time to myself," can hold a boundary without closing the door. Kindness doesn't require self-abandonment. Most of all, stop blaming yourself for surviving. That child who learned to disappear. They were doing their best. Now as an adult, you get to update the rules. You get to test slowly, gently whether the world might be safer than it once was. You don't have to become extroverted. You don't have to host parties or post group photos. You just need one person who sees you and stays. And that starts not with a grand gesture, but with a single breath, a single text, a single moment of choosing yourself without shame. Because healing begins not when you fix yourself, but when you finally stop punishing yourself for needing people. Remember that person we opened this video with? Sitting alone at lunch, scrolling through their phone while laughter swirls around them. They're still there, but now maybe you see them differently. Not as someone who has no friends, but as someone who's been protecting a heart that's known too much silence. And if that person is you, know this, you don't have to earn the right to be seen. You already have it. Just by being here, just by feeling this deeply, just by showing up, even when it's hard. Your quiet existence matters. Not because of how many people follow you, or how often your phone lights up, or whether you've mastered the art of small talk, but because you're human, and humanity was never meant to be lived in isolation. Not every storm needs your umbrella. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is stay dry. But not every silence needs to be filled, only the one inside you that whispers, "No one would care." That voice, it's lying. Someone would care, and someone will. Not because you become more, but because you finally let yourself be enough. If this helped you understand yourself or someone else a little better, you belong here. Hit subscribe, and remember, your quiet presence in this world is a gift, even when no one's watching. You're not alone, not really, and you never were.